Tee Higgins is no longer working with David Mulligetta, and Joe Burrow is still limited on the injury report. Let's get into what matters for the Cincinnati Bengals as they prepare to face Brian Callahan's Tennessee Titans this week.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We are Locked On Bengals here on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Shout out to the everydayers out there. Welcome back to those of you who make us your first listen. Good morning, perhaps, to those of you that are listening in the morning. Otherwise, if you're new to the show, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss anything here on Locked On Bengals, as we will have you up to date on all things going on with your favorite team all year round. And this week, despite this being a game preview episode in the traditional sense, it's our last episode of the week, barring unforeseen circumstances before the Bengals play the Tennessee Titans on Sunday. We're not starting with a game preview. That is not our first topic today, James, because Tee Higgins is either seeking new representation or has new representation, is regardless not working with David Mulligetta any longer. And the Bengals have a very clear history of not being able to get deals done with premier David Mulligetta clients, in particular, Jesse Bates being the most recent example. Hard to read this in any other way than something may have changed there.
It's huge because over the past 5 days, and if you would have asked me Monday morning, I would have said, man, wide receiver is going to be such a huge need. Like maybe they tag and trade him and get an extra pick, but Tee Higgins isn't back. And now, as we record this Thursday evening, it's the opposite. It feels like the pressure is on the Bengals to get it done. By the way, the Bengals front office, to be clear, that Joe has made it very, very clear. Jamar Chase today making it very, very clear that they want the Bengals big three to stay together. And of course, I agree. The Bengals are better with T. The Bengals, certainly, when you look at all of the holes that they have on this roster potentially this offseason, the last thing you want to do is go into the offseason with two receivers you really believe in, with Jamar Chase and Andre Yosevach. So if you have T in that mix, in those future plans, well, sign me up. And from an agent standpoint, it never felt like it was realistic with David Mulligetta. That doesn't mean David Mulligetta is a bad agent. In fact, I think it's the other way. I think David Mulligetta is willing to do anything and everything to get his client paid, even if it gets ugly. Even if it goes nuclear, he does not care. He's going to get you paid. And that's great. That's his job. And he's going to get a ton of athletes paid over his career, and has already done so with a bunch of guys, including Jesse Bates, as you mentioned. But if Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow want to stay together, if they want to be the Bengals' big three, much like any other big three, there's going to be sacrifices. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have to take less overall, but maybe it's a little less guaranteed, or it's a certain structure, or it's this, or it's that. And I will say this, I did kind of joke with T last offseason or last season at the end of the year about hypothetical numbers that I told him. And I did this with Jamar in April. So it's not like here's what I would offer you, right? We talk about it every day, right? With this stuff. So I might as well tell the players what I'm saying on the pot. So I'm like, yeah, this is what I would offer you this season, T. And it wasn't astronomical. It wasn't crazy. It's something that I would have said on here. I probably said on here multiple times. And he was like, ooh, like in a good way, like would have probably accepted it. But would his agent have accepted it? Who knows? Well, now it feels like that element is gone. We're getting an extra $1 million or $2 million per year from the Patriots. T might be like, yeah, I might get a little more on the open market, but I'm getting market value from the Bengals. If I'm getting market value and catching passes from Joe Burrow and playing with Jamar Chase, sign me up all day long. And I think that's where we're probably at.
It could be. I don't want to rule anything out at this point. It is interesting though how much the tenor has shifted. I don't disagree with that. Like it goes from someone replied to a tweet of mine during the game, and I said something along the lines of sign me up for Jamar Chase 20 targets a game for the rest of the year.
Hmm.
And the comment in reply was that's not sustainable. I was like, yeah, but it's fun. And the person comes back and says, no, I mean, that's not sustainable in a future where Tee Higgins isn't on the team. And that's the frame of mind that they were coming at it with, which is like, you can't just build your offense around having one receiver.
No doubt.
And so it goes from, like you said, if you asked on Monday or last Monday or last Friday or whatever, a week ago, and just as recently as a fan replying to me during the game and saying like, he's going to be gone, to now, which is, it's not a 1% or 0.01% chance anymore. That's not how it feels, right? There's still a chance and probably a good chance that Tee Higgins could want to still test free agency. That's still certainly possible, right? We can't say that T's going to get a deal done with the Bengals. It's, you can't say that today. I would say they can't negotiate with him right now, right? But it feels a whole lot different when you've got this agent change, knowing the contentious, we think, relationship between Mulligetta and the Bengals that we've seen play out in the past, that we saw play out with T last very offseason, I guess. That is a huge change. And the way that Joe is talking about Tee Higgins this week, and Jamar is talking about Tee Higgins this week, to your point, in his press conference on Thursday, saying T deserves to be here. He wants to be here. And T all along saying that he wants to be in Cincinnati does feel significantly different this Thursday than it did last Thursday, or really any point since last year, earlier, like long time, where Tee Higgins' future with the Bengals has looked very doubtful until this week.
Yeah, I mean, there are some that think the moment they drafted Jamar, it was like, all right, well, the writing's on the wall for T. Like going all the way back then, if you wanted to, like, oh, well, they're only going to pay one of these guys. You're not going to keep two. And the Joe comments doubling down, and by now we haven't talked about him, what he said on Wednesday at length, but
right.
But like, I wasn't there on Monday. I wasn't there on Monday. So to follow it up, my goal was to be like, all right, well, let's see how Joe feels. So I asked him about Tee Higgins' importance. And then the follow-up was like, oh, well, would you be disappointed if the front office doesn't get it done? Very disappointed. Oh, well, how do you handle building the roster, essentially, is what was the next question about T. And it's like, well, we have wants and needs, essentially. We'll have to figure out our need list. Is T a need, Joe? Yes, T is a need. Boom. Need.
Yeah, very clear.
So there are going to be a lot of people that say, oh, well, no, you need this or you need that on defense, or this interior or pass rush or this interior offensive line. You need those things and you want to. No. Joe just said it. And so now the message is to the front office. And by the way, the front office can ensure that Tee Higgins does not get to free agency, can ensure that they have a long negotiating window, and tag him again for $26 million. I'm sure he wouldn't love the tag, but if the tag is to extend him, which it didn't feel like it was last year, given his agent, and it was contentious.
And given everything we know, like we believe, based on what we know, there weren't negotiations after the franchise tag. Nothing significant.
Exactly. And when I say they were contentious between both sides, it doesn't mean they were yelling at each other. I just think they realized that neither one was budging.
Mm-hmm.
And so if neither one is budging, well, now whoever represents T next is probably going to say, hey, I'm going to get you a deal done. You want to be in Cincinnati? Let's get this deal done. Boom. That's it. And so I think the Bengals are in a much better position with T, Jamar, and Joe all on long-term deals than Jamar, Joe, and no T and a little extra money to spend, because they have plenty of money and plenty of cap space to make it work.
And I think that it's important not to learn the wrong lesson from when they were able to build the defense through free agency before, because they've tried to do it many other times and free agency just doesn't have a high hit rate. So when you know you have a great player, You keep your great players. And hopefully that is the right lesson the Bengals are learning, because I don't know how else you spend that money and actually make the team significantly better. That'd be very hard to do.
No, you don't. And there would be so many people that talk about positions. Wide receiver is as valuable of a position. It's why they're paid so much.
Well,
as valuable as it's ever been. And he's the fourth best player on the team right now.
And even if they spend on other positions in free agency, we've seen them try. It doesn't always work.
Yeah. I have a perfect example of that. I want to run it by you.
Okay.
I will do that coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy the way it should be. The best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. 1,000 times your cash on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Join now, because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. All you have to do is download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. The NFL season is wrapping up. It's the perfect time with, well, season-long fantasy leagues wrapping up as well, to get in on the fun with Prize Picks. By downloading the app today and using code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup, Prize Picks, run your game.
Today's episode of Locked On Bengals is also sponsored by Omaha Steaks, who knows that nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of their Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, in addition to that, an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtful, curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. That's 50% off at Omaha, OMAHA steaks.com, plus an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply.
All right, Jake. Let's play a little would you rather, because there's going to be so many people that say take T's money and get a defensive tackle and get a defensive back and get. Would you rather have Tee Higgins or Sheldon Rankins, Geno Stone, and honestly, insert any of the other Bengals free agent additions last year? And you could say, oh, well, last year, let's go with a hit. Let's just go with a hit that they did. And it could be a need. And obviously you're low on Sheldon Rankins and Geno Stone. Everybody is. But let's just say they get the 2025 version of Mike Hilton, right? The whatever the next Mike Hilton is, whoever it is, when they signed him in 2021, they get him. Would you rather have a slot corner, Geno Stone and Sheldon Rankins, or Tee Higgins?
Yeah, I mean, easy choice. Tee Higgins.
And I even found a hit. I wasn't just picking free agent busts.
And that's the way it would be, right? Like, they're not going to miss every free agent forever. They're not going to hit every free agent forever. Every single player acquisition in the NFL is roll of the dice. Keeping your own players in the NFL is to some degree a roll of the dice because of factors outside of your control, because crazy things happen. You never know how certain things go down. And, PFF, for example, just this week put out a list of their best free agent signings for the 2024 offseason. Guess who's number 1 on the list? Sam Darnold. Do you think anyone thought Sam Darnold was going to be the best free agent signing in the NFL when he signed with the Vikings last year? No? Probably
not. I mean, I get the logic of signing him, but yeah, you did.
He wasn't going to start. Like,
sure.
They drafted a quarterback, and they were planning to start that quarterback. You go down the list, there's some surprising names on the list that you're probably not thinking of. There are also some names on the list that you are thinking of. Derrick Henry is on the list. Saquon Barkley is on the list. Russell Wilson, also on the list. And when that signing happened, people thought, oh, maybe he'll be okay. But he's been good for that Pittsburgh offense and those moon balls to George Pickens and executing what Arthur Smith wants over there now that he's healthy. Anyway, point is that a lot of times free agency doesn't go the way you expect it to. And, you can play the same example with the Bengals making decisions about their own in the past. You go back to where they spent that Jesse Bates money on their own guys and external guys that year. You'd probably rather have Jesse Bates. That's
Nick Scott, Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson. And Logan's a hit. I think Pratt to a decent degree is a hit, keeping those guys. But if we're playing the game, doesn't feel great, does it?
That's not even how the game works in real life. Like in real life, that can be Logan Wilson and Jesse Bates because,
no doubt,
it's not a zero-sum game in real life like that.
And by the way, in that scenario where it's Rankins, Geno, and Mike Hilton, the other element here, two more things on T, and this is the first one. I just don't want to forget. But the other element here is you still need a receiver in that scenario. So it's like, all right, well, who do you get? Right? When do you get them? It's tough. A receiver would be a huge need. Go ahead, respond to that. And then I have one more thing on T before we
We've seen them try to backfill good players leaving for years and seen them spend draft picks and free agent capital and all of these resources to just try to replace their good players. It's maybe a little bit cheaper sometimes, but it still costs something. And so even if T goes and they have that money to spend elsewhere, they're paying a different cost that over time could end up being much more significant than a financial cost. Not to even get into like the whole injury side of things and how that should affect T's value, all that. Not even talking about that, but just when we're talking about letting good players walk.
Yeah, it's a tale as old as time. You know what you're getting from T. And so just say it out. Let's just say it's 13 games a year. Okay. If it's 13 games a year, plus he's healthy for January and hopefully February, if you're viewing it from a Bengals standpoint, you deal with that. You roll with it. I think going back to how did the Bengals get better in 2025, taking T off the team
makes you worse.
Thinking that it's like significantly worse. And people are like, oh, well, he missed games. What Joe and Jamar are doing, it's going to be really, really hard for them to do this week in and week out, even for the final 4 games. It is. I hope it happens. It'd be great. Break all the records. I'm not saying that. But it's freaking hard, man. And they're going to need T if they're going to be the offense they plan to be. Otherwise, there is something wrong with the offense. Otherwise, there are holes and issues. And so I'm totally down with it. The other thing I wanted to mention with T, just because they do that and did, let's say they re-sign T and they re-sign Jamar this offseason, and both guys are here long-term, they will still be able to add offensive line help, defensive line help, secondary help, any of those things. And regardless, Jake, T or not, you know what else they need to do besides getting it right in free agency? They have to draft well. So all of the things that you have to do when you pay T, it's like, oh, draft well and find the right guys in free agency. You have to do those things anyway. It's just you have T with Jamar, with Joe. I like that better.
I find it hard to disagree with any of that too much. In a perfect world where you hit on every free agent you signed,
sure,
maybe it's a different conversation. But that is not the world we live in. That is not reality.
No, the reality is that they found Tee Higgins. And finding the next Tee Higgins is really, really hard. Drafting pass rushers has been really hard for them. So why are we, it's one of those things where like, yeah, of course they got to get the draft right moving forward. Duh. Doesn't change if you have T. It's one less guy that you have to replace.
Their inability to accurately assess pass rushers or offensive linemen doesn't change because Tee Higgins is still on the team. Tee Higgins is just still on the team. I think there's probably more to this than we could talk about if we really wanted to. We could bring the devil's advocate approach up if we really wanted to. But the Cincinnati Bengals have a football game to play on Sunday, and it's against an old friendly face. And boy, do we miss him, friend of the show, Brian Callahan. Let's get into some of the things that matter for that football game to finish up the show coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. And maybe you think, especially since Jake misses Brian Callahan, look at him just speaking for me. Who says I miss Brian Callahan? But if you think that Brian Callahan and the Titans are going to handle business, upset the Bengals, well, you can get in on the action at FanDuel.com. Or maybe it's the other way. You think the Bengals are going to go on the road and as road favorites win a second straight game, improve to 6-8, regardless. You can get in on the action right now at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. And new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Go to FanDuel.com right now, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's America's #1 sports book. So FanDuel, yeah, they got you covered. It's going to be convenient, easy. Again, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com.
James, as we discuss this Tennessee Titans road trip for the Cincinnati Bengals, the conversation starts, as always, especially this December in particular, with Joe Burrow. He was limited again on Thursday. And once again, I have to think to myself and can't stop myself from having the thought that is, if Joe can't move, and I didn't really like the way he was taking hits last week in a game that probably won't end up mattering, and he can't move, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not saying they should bench him, but I'm not saying they shouldn't bench him either. Like, it's something that I would think about if he can't move. I wouldn't want to see him be subjected to some of the hits that he would end up taking that he otherwise could have avoided. And I think it would diminish his play. We've seen what happens to his level of play when he can't move.
Yeah, I agree. I think he will be able to move, but it is a short week as of now. By Sunday, it won't feel like a short week, but really Thursday, as we're recording this is Wednesday for the Bengals. Their Friday practice is much harder than it normally is after a Monday night game. Everything's condensed. Wednesday is basically a walkthrough where they just get the guys on the field a little bit. So just to give people some context of how the schedule works. So we'll see how Joe is, but limited Wednesday, limited Thursday. I think that is certainly not just the key, but the thing that matters the most. A week ago when we were recording, less than that, it was Sunday because our game preview was Sunday. What did you talk about? Joe's health.
Mm-hmm.
The final 5 weeks worried about Joe's health. I think Jeffrey Simmons, Tavondre Sweat, a good pass rush, certainly a concern considering he's banged up right now.
Yeah, and it's not just those guys. There's other pieces there that are solid pass rush pieces on that Tennessee Titans defense. And it comes down to his ability to move. If he can move, fine, okay. But then do more of what they did against the Cowboys. There's no Micah Parsons on the Tennessee Titans. And we just talked with Tyler from Locked On Titans about how that pass rush has been very disappointing from his perspective this year. We've also said the same thing about the Bengals pass rush this year, but Trey Hendrickson can still get home from time to time. Jeffrey Simmons can still get home from time to time. Maybe Tavondre Sweat can still toss one of these guards from time to time. And those are big guys that can put big hits on Joe Burrow. And so there is that. But last week against Dallas, we saw them use screens more than we've seen them use them in recent history or in this season period. They ran 6 screens. They ran more play action than they normally do. And so maybe you need to do a little bit more of that, because it's not just, like I said last week when we were talking about this topic of protecting Joe and reducing hits on Joe Burrow. It's not just the offensive line blocking guys. It's not just keeping tight ends in to help protect physically. It's also schematic stuff that we can see this offense implement to reduce some of those hits on Joe Burrow, from the run game to the screen game to the play action game to moving him out of the pocket, depending again on how he can move. All of these things are at their disposal, and I would like to see them continue using those tools to minimize the hits on Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the interesting thing to me about this game is you have someone that knows the Bengals offense as well as anyone on the other side, knows Joe as well as anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there's an edge there that matters. And that's what I think is so interesting is we've seen how awful of a matchup this can be for Joe. And they've won a lot of these games against the Titans, but the Titans know how to make it ugly.
And it's a Mike Macdonald disciple, a defensive coordinator. And we know that Mike Macdonald gave the Ravens issues too.
You hate McDonald's, no doubt.
Or gave the Bengals issues.
So, no doubt. And you hate McDonald's. And so when you mix that together, just kidding, McDonald's sponsor us. No, I know. Dude, I'm kidding. I would crush a McDouble right now.
I would love a McDouble. I'm so hungry.
Yeah, me too. In a 10-piece. All right. But when you have that, so you have a Ravens defensive coach from a couple of years ago that gave Joe hell. And now he's in Tennessee and he's figuring things out a little bit, but he's still in Tennessee. And then you have Brian Callahan who knows Joe as well as anyone. If I'm Brian, I'm not that he's not in defensive meetings at all, but I'm going over the defensive side a little bit more and helping them with the game plan. You know Joe and Jamar and T as well as anyone. So how it usually gets downplayed, but it does matter a little bit. And the how is going to be interesting on Sunday. I think that this is going to be a really tight game, Jake. I really do. I think this is going to be one of those dogfight games where the Titans aren't a good team, but it's a tough matchup. It's going to be hard for the Bengals. And the Bengals, it's not like they're going to go out physical the Titans right now. We don't trust them to do that. I do think that the defense, as weird as it sounds, so I think the offense is going to be contained a little bit more than they have been in recent weeks. But I do think the defense – go ahead.
I was just going to say the Titans offense has been struggling mightily. 19 points against Washington, 6 points against Jacksonville. That's a rough stretch.
And so that's where I'm at is it's like, all right, well, this is that bounce that you were talking about where the defense can say, like, if you're Cam Taylor-Britt, this has got to be all right, Will Levis is the quarterback. Calvin Ridley is their number one receiver, who's really a number two in this league. And despite what was said on our crossover, not in the same stratosphere as Tee Higgins. And so it's like.
Yeah, we let him get away with that one, didn't we?
Yeah, but which is fine, whatever. I'm not going to get into that debate, but he's just not. Like, good luck. And I like Calvin Ridley, but like he'd be the number 3 receiver on the Bengals, and it's not even really close. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, can you force a couple of turnovers, create some chaos? Like, I expect that Sunday. Much like I expect Joe to not be as crisp. Maybe he is. Maybe he goes out there and plays at a high level. I just think it's a tough ask, and I think he's going to be sore. He's competitive, and he'll be able to gut through it and grind and all those things. I get it. But I do think this defense is going to need to step up and make some plays on Sunday.
The Titans have one of the worst offenses in the NFL. So if there was ever a time to figure something out, and Tyler talked about red zone issues, they're the 3rd lowest scoring offense in the NFL. The Bengals will have played after this game the 6th lowest scoring offenses in the NFL. The New York Giants, the worst. The Patriots, the 2nd worst. Titans, 3rd worst. Cleveland, Carolina, Vegas. That's the 6th worst offenses in the NFL. The Bengals got decent results on defense against the other teams on this list that they played for the most part. Carolina, they gave up 24. Tennessee has scored more than 20 points, or sorry, I'll just say 20 or more points to give them one more game in 3 games this year. 31 against Miami early in the season in week 4, 20 against New England, 32 against Houston, and that's it. The rest of their games, they're at or below that 17-point mark for the most part. And so if the defense shows up, this Tennessee team is giving up a lot of points. They're not scoring a lot of points. There's a reason that their record is what it is. I do wish Brian Callahan all the best in his endeavors, and I will just say it in first person this time. I do miss him, but I think his team has a rough shot this week against the Bengals. At the same time,
that makes one of us. I'm making Brian the enemy now. Go ahead.
If the Bengals were good this year, we would be calling this a potential trap game. And you can't really call it a trap game because the Bengals haven't been good this year. They're better than the Titans, though. And so there are some potential trap game vibes. Not saying this is a trap game outright, but it could be. That feeling around it is there.
Yeah, I don't think they go out there. They go down there and kick their ass. That's what you're
You
saying.
might,
I don't,
but
I'm not. I do not. They could, for sure, could. Right, especially if you start off Will Levis pick 6, Chase Brown 40-yard touchdown run, or Jamar Chase 80-yard touchdown pass. Like you could, and you jump out on him. I just these games have just never been that way, and I expect Brian to have a few tricks up his sleeve. Like I just think it's going to be one of those games. We'll see. Might be way off, but I think it's going to go down to the wire. I think the smart money would be on the Bengals. Who are you betting on, Will Levis or Joe Burrow? But I don't think it's going to be easy.
yeah, could be a challenge for sure. And Tyler mentioned the special teams issues that they're having in Tennessee as well. I mean,
Just all over the special teams.
it's crazy to me that special teams is that much of an issue, but I guess it has been a significant
It
story.
has
And
been.
it's
Oh,
not
it
just
has
Tyler
been.
saying it. Like that's a real thing around the Titans. But we'll see what happens, and we'll see
Special
how
teams.
Callahan's team performs against the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend. We'll be back with you after the game with the takeaways and whatever there is to talk about after the Bengals play the Titans. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.